Someone once said, I know nothing about art, but I know what I like. And that kind of sums up jazz for me. I know nothing about jazz. I wouldn't know post-bop from bebop from hard bop. But I know what I like. And I have a small jazz collection, but it's ever growing. And I'm getting a handle on what I like. And I'm working out what I don't like. But what I've discovered is that I like stuff that relates back to my love of rock music, because that's what I grew up. I was a teenage metalhead, and everything has stemmed off that. My taste has broadened immeasurably since my teens, but my entry point to jazz was stuff that had that link, however small, to rock music. And this is my response to Chris, who challenged Tunes From The Mancave. He's set up the Jazz Vinyl Tag of 2021. 21 questions and a chance to show off some of the items in my jazz collection. Like I say, I don't know a lot about jazz, so some of these will probably, not impress. There's definitely one rarity in here, and hopefully some interesting things. Okay, question 1, an album that got me into jazz. Well, my dad was big into his big band music and swing, and I never knew what albums he was playing, but that was just a part of my childhood, hearing that. And he raved about Buddy Rich, and I grew up loving Buddy Rich's drumming and ended up being a drummer myself for many years. This isn't an album that I think my dad ever owned, because he preferred earlier stuff, but this kind of represents the first jazz I got into. So Buddy Rich, The Roar of 74, which is a great album. It's got that kind of rock jazz crossover thing. Joe Beck on guitar, Tony Levin on bass, and is highly recommended. Question 2, the first jazz album I bought. Again, the rock link. Billy Cobham's Spectrum, and of course Tommy Bolin on guitar on here. And as a drummer, you have to drool over Billy Cobham's playing. Brilliant album, absolutely brilliant. And I had the pleasure of seeing Billy Cobham play the Jazz Cafe at the end of 2019, and met the man afterwards and shook his hand, got his autograph, and here, there, somewhere I'll stick a photo of that, and you can see what a fanboy I am. Next up, a record I own on Blue Note. There are many classics, most of which I don't have, but I thought I'd show a more recent one from the late 80s. Another drummer, surprise, surprise. Tony Williams. And a really good album. I wasn't sure myself whether I was going to enjoy it much when I got it, just because of the date on the sleeve. I thought it might be, not quite his greatest moment, but it's a really good album. Again, ticks those rock boxes for me. Not as much as the stuff he did under the name Tony Williams Lifetime, and this album I can thoroughly recommend. But yeah, this one on Blue Note, great stuff. Next up, number 4, a record I own on Prestige. Don't have too many on Prestige, but I chose Jackie McLean Quartet, Quintet, Sextet, 4, 5 and 6. And that's a really, really good album. And there's your Prestige label. So that's more in the traditional sort of modern jazz sort of vein, I suppose. I wasn't going to attempt to use the jazz vocabulary, because, like I say, I struggle. But a good album nevertheless. Next up, a record I own on Impulse, and I've gone for John Coltrane Quartet and the Crescent album. And this came out, I think, the year before I Love Supreme. And this is a sort of 70s reissue, and it's reproduced what looks like the cover photograph from A Love Supreme. Great great album. Then 6 is a record I own on Riverside, which is easy because I don't own any on Riverside. Number 7, a record I own on Contemporary, and this is the only one I own on Contemporary, and it's Bud Shank's Tomorrow's Rainbow, which is a decent album. Probably just makes it on the right side of that kind of slightly smoother sound that I find a bit off-putting, but this has enough to recommend it, enough to make me want to keep it in the collection. Bud Shank. Number 8, a record I own on a subsidiary or small jazz label. Well, it's a very small label. I don't think it's exclusively jazz. I think there's the odd country record and folk records put out on it. And the label is Tony Pike Music Limited. And the album in question is the Bird Curtis Quintet. The self-titled album from, I think, 1968, but I could be wrong. And this was released in minuscule numbers. There are only 100 copies pressed. Most of them, I think, were distributed or sold just at their gigs. From what I've been reading, only 9 have ever come up for auction. So your chances of getting one are very limited, although I think it's been a reissue in recent years. But this is seriously rare. It's British modern jazz, brilliantly played. Musicianship is superb, and I feel a bit guilty taking this off somebody who is a true jazz aficionado, because I picked this up in a charity shop for £1. I just saw it and thought that looks interesting. Got it home, looked it up, and realised the thing sells for hundreds of pounds. So, I mean, the value to me is in the music. So, I could flip it and treat myself to a whole bunch of other albums, but it's not one that's going anywhere at the moment because it's a really enjoyable listen. In fact, the cover's more orange than it looks on the screen there. There you go, the angle. Yeah, good stuff. And question 9, a record I own that not many people know about, but probably should. Again, because I'm not a big jazz head, I don't really know what jazz fans know about, what's considered common and what's not. But this is an album that I would recommend to anybody, even somebody who's into rock, perhaps somebody trying to feel their way into jazz. And that's Danser by the Bobo Stenson Quartet, featuring Jan Garbarek. And this album is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. Absolutely gorgeous. It's on the ECM label, which has very quickly become my favourite jazz label. It's jazz, but it's so atmospheric. It's bordering on ambient music, although it's not that kind of ambient music where you need crystals and a dream catcher to listen to it. It's just beautiful soundscapes. Yeah, I can't recommend this enough. Just one of my favourite albums in any genre at the moment. Really enjoying this. And question 10, a favourite jazz record bought in 2020. This was easy. Didn't buy a huge amount of jazz in 2020. It's a genre that I dip in and out of. But this is an album I had on CD and just thought I need this on vinyl and see a copy that's in good nick and the right price. And it's Jaco Pastorius' self-titled album, which is an essential part of any record collection, jazz or otherwise. Superb performances on here, stellar lineup of musicians, Herbie Hancock, Lenny White rather, Randy Brecker, great stuff. Then favourite record in an artist's discography. Like I say, my jazz collection is small, probably only a couple of couple of 250 albums. And I'm gradually building it up, but one artist that I keep seeking is Terje Rypdal, and I've no idea if that's how you pronounce the name. I think he's Norwegian. I should have done my research better, but he is a smoking hot guitar player. And again, it's that, you know, rock jazz crossover for me. You know, his albums are, you know, beautifully atmospheric with jazz backing. I mean, here he's backed by trumpet, flugelhorn, 6 and 4 string electric basses, the usual drums and percussion, but he plays electric guitar and ARP synthesizer, and his playing is absolutely smoking. It really is. I mean, I can imagine fans of Hendrix getting off on what they hear on here. Again, on ECM, I love the aesthetic of ECM albums. You know, there's always beautiful, understated artwork. Love the layout on the back there. There's the ECM label again. And yeah, this is probably at the moment my favourite album by Rypdal, but there's plenty more of his for me yet to discover. But this, I'd say, it's a good entry point for someone else wanting to hear what he's about. Next up is my favourite record bought in a bricks and mortar shop. I've gone with this one because it's a bit different. It's a very well-known artist, but perhaps not a really well-known album in his discography. And it's a modern jazz symposium of music and poetry with Charles Mingus. And this album is fantastic. To call it poetry might be stretching it. It's certainly beat poetry, I suppose. It's more like a rhythmic narration. It's very atmospheric. The narration weaves in and out of the music, and it has a very sort of urban vibe. It reminds me in some ways of the kind of things that Gil Scott-Heron did, and even of some of the sort of ideas picked up by some of the more experimental rap and hip hop artists, I suppose. This first track, Scenes in the City, is beautifully evocative. When I listen to it, it brings to mind scenes from Hitchcock's Rear Window, that kind of sense of being in a sort of city apartment, overhearing the conversations and the sirens and everything else going on in the city. It's a fantastic listen. I thoroughly recommend this. This reissue is on the Doxy label, which I'm not familiar with it. I don't know how it's regarded, but this sounds fantastic. It's beautiful pressing, although I think the reproduction of the sleeve art leaves something to be desired. It's a bit fuzzy, but very much recommended. Next up is a record I bought online. Well, this one I bought after seeing it on a fellow VC contributor's YouTube channel. It's a French guy called, goes under the name Boulzabar. I'll try and remember to leave a link below. One of his videos, he had some music playing in the background. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. I hope he mentions what that is. And he did. He showed the sleeve. And it's this guy, Henri Tezier, I think it's pronounced, and his Varesh album. The guy's a double bass player, and this is a beautiful album. It's so atmospheric. It's a beautiful, relaxing, atmospheric listen, and really one that's well worth your time to track down. And question 14 is a record a friend found for me, or gifted to me, and this was a gift from my very good friend Andy. We have similar taste on the whole, although he tends to branch off into more of a sort of soul and stacks and funk direction, and he thought I'd like this, and he's absolutely right. It's Les McCann and Eddie Harris and their Live at Montreux album. And I can't really add much to what the hype sticker on the front says, which is it's jazz meets soul in an act of spontaneous combustion. And that's what it is. It sounds like it's all off the cuff. It's funky, it's jazzy. It's a great album. Number 15, a jazz box set. I've only got one, and this is it. Jacques Lussier plays Bach at the Champs-Élysées Theatre. And it's, to me, this is kind of cocktail party jazz. Well played. It doesn't excite me. But when I'm in the mood, I'll stick it on. I kind of get the impression Jacques Lussier just made his living interpreting Bach, because I've never seen a Jacques Lussier album which doesn't mention Bach in the title. But he knew what he was good at, and he stuck to it. Question 16 is a jazz 10-inch or 7-inch, and it's here. Again, the jazz drummer. Another one of my dad's faves, Gene Krupa. And great picture sleeve there. On the Philips label. 17, my most recent jazz score. Well, this one, again, I think it straddles genres a little bit. I'm not sure you'd strictly call it jazz, although it's definitely got heavy jazz elements, probably more jazz than anything else, but there's a lot of soundtrack sort of sounds to it, and elements of rock and funk as well. And that's Zeitgeist by Tony Coe. It's an album based on poems by Jill Robin, and I have no idea who Jill Robin was, and I knew nothing about this album when I bought it, but the cover art intrigued me and the price was right, and I thought I'd give it a go, and I'm so glad that I did, because this is superb. This has elements of almost of a Lalo Schifrin kind of 70s cop soundtrack, mixed in with the jazz and the funk and these narrations of these poems. And it's a brilliant album, absolutely brilliant. I can thoroughly recommend this one. A jazz record I hope to find in 2021. Well, that's kind of difficult, because with jazz I don't so much have a want list as just like to stumble on things and check them out and learn from my mistakes, or just have, you know, really lucky finds. Having said that, there's a couple of Miles Davis albums that I'd love to pick up. I haven't got On the Corner on vinyl yet. Live Evil I'd love on vinyl, and anything on the ECM label. You really cannot go wrong with that label. They have this house sound, not that the artists sound the same, but they just have this house sound which just draws me in. The production is always fantastic, the pressings are flawless, like I say, the aesthetics of the sleeve, everything about that label just does it for me. 19, a jazz record I own that I'd like to upgrade. I bought this a few years ago. I love Larry Coryell's guitar playing. He's another one who sounds like a rock guitarist playing with the jazz backing a lot of the time. And I picked this album up, checked the condition in the shop. Beautiful condition, absolutely pristine. Handed over my money, walked out. Of course, what I didn't check was it was the right album. And it's another ECM label album, and it's Dave Liebman's Drum Ode. And this is a brilliant album, and I would love another copy just so I'll have a sleeve for it. I've since replaced the Larry Coryell album, so I've got a really good copy of that. But yeah, I need that Dave Liebman album. And I'll be sneaky here and put a second one in, and I'd like to upgrade this as well. Dave Brubeck's Truth Is Fallen. I mean, he's another artist that was one of my early listens in jazz, you know, growing up. He's often played in the house. But this is one of his later albums where he's playing with a rock band, the New Heavenly Blue, who I think featured a couple of his sons. So keeping it in the family there, and it's quite different from Take 5 and what he's generally known for. This is a trashed copy, and I played it once. I thought, not risking that on my turntable again. But I did make a note at the time, interesting album, replaced, so going to get another one of those. Question 20 is a free jazz record. I like a bit of free jazz. I like the experimentation. I'm always open to hearing musicians making a racket and pushing boundaries. And this album by Stu Martin and John Sermon, live at Woodstock Town Hall, ticks all those boxes. Great album. John Sermon plays various reeds on here, various saxes and so on, and Stu Martin plays drums and synthesizers. So just the two of them, and they make an unholy racket, and it's fantastic. You never feel, even though it's free jazz, that they are losing track of what the other person is playing. They are in step and swirling around each other and playing off each other, and it's a really intriguing listen. I suppose it's the jazz equivalent, again taking things back to rock, of that album by Attila, the duo that Billy Joel had, where you just him on piano and organ and his friend on drums, and it's similarly cacophonous in places, and yeah, it is very highly recommended. There you go. And final question is my Desert Island Jazz album, and this was a no-brainer. This is my favourite jazz album of all time. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. To me, it encapsulates perfectly what I want from jazz. That mix of jazz and rock and pushing boundaries. And bitches brew. Never bettered as far as I'm concerned. I love this. I'd recommend this to anybody, no matter what kind of music they're into. I think people, if they've got an open mind, they could find something to love here. For me, it's an essential for us, collection of someone who's into psychedelia, who's into jazz, who's into rock. Absolutely brilliant. So that's it. That's my 21 answers. I'd be really interested to see any comments that you have on my choices. And thanks again to Chris, Tunes From The Mancave, for posting the questions. And really enjoyed doing this one. Nice to be out of my comfort zone and show some albums by artists I really don't know a lot about, not qualified to speak about. Okay, take care, and back with some rock soon. Bye.